hello to the Treasurer of New South Wales, the Honourable Dominic Perrottet, the member for Epping, as his constituents know him, and the Treasurer of New South Wales, as the rest of us do. Treasurer, interesting time in politics. As we record this interview today, there's obviously been up, down and all around with some of your colleagues where they're heading off to Edmund Aero. It looks like they're both staying, so New South Wales is the winner in continuity. But nothing like the change we've been through bushfires, COVID-19, etc. What your helicopter view of a New South Wales economy, New South Wales government, just overall, how do you think we've adapted to the massive seismic external shifts we've had to deal with?
Look, I think we've done well. I think we came into the pandemic, Chris, in a pretty strong position in circumstances, though, where we'd come through, as you say, drought. Well, the drought's still ongoing, the bushfire and the bushfire recovery, which we're now in that space, and then have this as a triple whammy off the back of it. It's been a challenge, but look, I think as a state, we're well positioned as well as we could be. I think given where the world is with the pandemic, we've been able to learn from some of their measures. And I think our decision to kind of lock down quickly, but then to relax out of that was the right decision, because it's enabled us to kind of build up our ICU capacity, the public health system. And I believe we're now in a strong position to get as much of the economy moving as possible alongside the virus. But look, it's going to be a very difficult time, but I think, we'll come through the other end of this. I sit there and think we can get as many people in jobs and as many businesses in business. That's a positive thing. This is every generation has had its challenges, and this is our generation's challenge. If we work together, I think we'll get through and come out the other side well.
So a massive result for federal and state governments in managing the immediate impacts, public health and economic impacts, welfare impacts of this disaster. Coming out the other side of the bridge, as the Prime Minister talks about, do you see a much bigger role now, whether in a Western Sydney context or all of Australia, for the private sector to play a bigger partnership on the other side of the bridge?
Yeah, for sure. I don't believe the government can do this alone. And I've always been a strong advocate of private capital, of the public sector partnering with the private sector to achieve great social outcomes. And that's whether it's building infrastructure, whether that's providing government services. And I know there's general concerns that come up with that. But at the end of the day, I think what's most important is that if it's in the best interest of our taxpayers at a low price, to get the best price for our citizens, but also the best service, we should explore all options. And I also think we've probably gone through a period of time where governments have been a bit cautious in this space. But I don't think, as I've said before, you can take a pre-pandemic thinking into a post-pandemic world. It's going to be It's going to be an obligation on all states and the federal government to make sure we do everything we can to get our economy moving as strongly as possible through this.
You've been the one that people look to within government that has been probably the most dynamic embracer. You and Minister Ayres are probably renowned for being the ones most out there talking to the private sector, embracing that. I noticed you've been talking about maybe some tax reform around land tax, way to approach it, maybe a different concept, and you've launched the Productivity Commissioner, Peter Archistrat, to finally do a bit of a study vaguely around value capture. Of all the changes that we've gone through in New South Wales, wonderful, I think, in recent times in governance and government working with governments well. To some extent, I think the private sector's sort of been edged out a little bit from, say, where it was 5 years ago. Does this give us the chance to recalibrate that and get the private sector back in town, not only just to pay for stuff, but to work as a more partnership with you, particularly in a Western Sydney context where we have such both enterprise but opportunity to build the big infrastructure projects and take that lead with government?
Yeah, absolutely it does, Chris. And we need to take this opportunity to provide greater prosperity for future generations. And I think there's a great chance for governments to reflect that we have a real obligation to leave our state a better place than we found it. And someone asked the other day about whether or not we should ditch the scoping study into the City Motorway Corporation. Now, no, we're not doing that. What we will be doing is making sure we explore every single avenue. And to take something like that off the table would demonstrate poor thinking, because why would you not be examining the best options in order to deliver unlock capital to deliver further infrastructure? So Western Sydney is going to be key to that. We continue to invest in infrastructure. The infrastructure as well, let's really think about it, has been what has kept the New South Wales economy going so well. Before the pandemic, and in my view, infrastructure investment is what's going to drive us out and into the future. So Western Sydney is crucial for that. We need to make sure we bring projects forward as well. I think that are shovel ready, screwdriver ready to give as many people in work as possible. And infrastructure is an essential service. It's the one thing I think that we can say that's really going to guide us through this pandemic and out the other side. So this is not the time to take ideas off the table. Everything should be on the table.
That's great news for the communities who are waiting and sweating on a powerhouse, on a couple of metro lines, on an airport, Aerotropolis, and all manner of big infrastructure projects that are flowing through. I'm just interested, there's a lot of talk about shovel-ready projects, screwdriver-ready projects. They often bring to mind people sitting in bulldozers with a pickaxe and the high vis. I'm also interested in bringing the projects a little further back, those great white-collar factories, get the planners and designers and architects working as well. Is it only the things that are ready to literally turn dirt, or can we look to those other projects a bit further up the scale to bring them forward as well in thinking?
Yeah, it's a combination of both. It's the smaller projects with the larger projects. We've got a strong pipeline, which we want to continue. But at the same time, there are smaller projects, whether it's maintenance work on schools and roads. I think the councils will have a significant role to play here. They're sitting on a significant amount of cash reserves. It's there. I announced some finance for them just recently, so we keep all their staff on during this period of time. We're the only state that's done that. But what I expect from councils is to also get money out the door now and get infrastructure projects working. We can't stop building our city and state. Our three cities vision remains in place. We just want to keep going, and we're going to have to go hard and fast. And the more we do, the better we'll be. And that means we've got to, I think, in certain circumstances, allow for projects to occur that might not be perfect. I don't want a building education revolution on our hands. You want to make sure it's going in the right area. But at the same time, we can't let perfection be the enemy of the good. And success, to me, looks like keeping as many people in jobs and as many businesses going during this period of time. And that's what I'm completely focused on.
My good mate Tony Shepherd always says, every chance you get, remind them about maintenance. So there's that sense of not only new projects, the upgrading and looking to get people working, tightening the bolts and cleaning the machine down as well. You mentioned the three cities, Tricia. You've recently relocated in your own seat from the Western Parkland City to the Central River City, from the Hawkesbury to the banks of the Lancome River in Epping. Do you get a sense that the Western Parkland City almost defines itself? It's got the Aerotropolis Airport and Greenfields. Do you now get a sense of the Central City having its own character and how it could develop similarly?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that they're all connected. So we want the Central City to do incredibly well. Obviously, we're talking about the airport is down the track and the work's going in now. And that's important because we don't want to build infrastructure after the event. We want to make sure that we're building in front, and that will help that city grow. But the Central City, and if you look at the light rail coming on and the Metro West, which we're planning, these are the transport connections that are going to allow these areas to grow. Lighthouse precinct as well, where we can make sure that whether it's health and research, infrastructure investment, these are the tech, I think, educational opportunities that we have that will create jobs and help our economy going forward. That's what this is all about. And they might not be the most sexy things to open, but at the end of the day, we know that if you look at this pandemic, one thing that's I think really coming to the fore is the importance of a strong economy. As we often in government talk about it and doesn't really translate on the ground, but a strong economy is all about keeping people in work so they can have a job and they can provide for their family and put food on the table. And at the same time, we want a highly educated state. We want to lead the way. And this is a real opportunity to not just continue the infrastructure investment and our three cities vision, but at the same time, it's an opportunity, or in fact an obligation for us to change our thinking. And I believe the public will support that because they know they want our economy to grow forwards for So I think we're thinking for the first time that we want to make sure. I think it's always been just assumed that our kids are going to have a better life than we had, and we've probably taken that for granted. And here's the opportunity for us to pick the ball up and run.
And you got lots of kids to get a better life for them too. So it's,
that's true.
That's you. Where this also brings on this period of transformation, big hope, think of reform. Can I plant an idea for you? It's almost counterintuitive that the Liberal Treasurer become the hero of affordable and social housing. This constant problem where we're always playing catch-up, so we're never going to get there. The vulnerability of housing's become obvious to even more people through this pandemic. Is there maybe in things like metro building programs and others, can we maybe, and through innovative tax measures, if the feds will move on build to rent and things like that, do you get a sense where maybe going to, for the first time, get ahead of the curve on this whole intractable problem of how to have enough social housing, affordable housing stock built by public and private sector?
Well, one thing that I'm very much focused on, particularly at this stage, is making sure that our infrastructure investment doesn't just create jobs during this period, but we have a very good social outcome on the other side. So social and affordable housing is crucial to that. There are also projects, I believe, that can be shovel-ready and ramped up very, very quickly. So when you're looking at the list of projects that we could invest in or bring forward, I look at social housing and affordable housing as a real opportunity.
And I encourage the Ivanhoe acceleration in near your electorate. Yes.
And obviously we made an announcement there recently, and I think having that mix of housing obviously it's good to provide social and affordable housing for those who need it, but I also think it's important for opportunities and down the track that we have a mix of housing in those estates, and that's why we're very proud of that decision. But also, as you correctly say, Chris, looking at the tax arrangements, I've also been an advocate for some time in terms of build to rent. I've seen that successful in overseas jurisdictions. I think that can provide a great opportunity, particularly for young people, to get into the property market and have housing, and then obviously move on from that down the track. So there are really great case studies, out of the box thinking that has occurred in other jurisdictions that we should follow. And we've got to start with, we can do something, rather than having the natural sense of, it's all too hard and someone's going to complain politically and there's going to be a protest group come up. Well, I think we, as a community as a whole, we've got to look at what the better outcome is for everybody here. I'm not saying cut corners, but let's look at new ways of doing things to deliver great social outcomes. And as you say, I think social and affordable housing ticks a number of boxes on the jobs growth and economic growth through the infrastructure investment and the social good at the end.
So I think from a Western Sydney perspective, you've got the permission slip to do things differently. Business as unusual is going to have to be our future if we're going to, if we're going to meet the employment issues, the growth. One more thing I'm a little concerned about, Western Sydney to some extent, the critics would say it's been a bit almost of a Ponzi scheme based on growth and migration. No matter which way you look at it, we're going to have less migration in the next little while through either supply or demand issues, local politics, push-pull, access, etc. Are you a little concerned about the New South Wales, particularly Western Sydney economy being a little addicted to growth, residential development, etc.? And is it a thick enough, fat enough market to sustain a drop in the sort of retail demand of shopping and new homes? Can your infrastructure spend see it through till more residences built in advanced manufacturing and other areas?
Look, I'm very confident of a bright future, particularly in Western Sydney. When it comes to economic growth, they talk about 3 Ps: population, productivity, and participation. Of the 3, I'd say population growth in many ways is the sugar. It's productivity that's the protein, and we need to make sure that we look at better ways and new ways of doing things, cutting red tape, cutting regulation. I think that's what's really going to drive our economic growth through this. And yes, population growth is important, but at the same time, off the back of that comes significant challenges with further infrastructure investment. To me, it's all about an economy can't operate in isolation. We've got to make sure that we have strong communities and that they function very well together. And yes, there's this right around the world. There'll be a challenge of migration, and Sydney and New South Wales will not be unique with that challenge. But that's even more of a reason as to why we need to look at new and better ways of doing things, better tax structures, better regulation. I mean, governments sit there over time and just build up red tape and regulation. That's what no one in government, there's no government department that sits there and says, how do I make it easier? We've done a lot with Service New South Wales, but that's the start. It can't be the end. And we really need to look at ways where government gets out of the way. And if that means, that means that certain mistakes get made, well, so be it. Otherwise, we'll just live in a cautious society where government agencies just sit there and tick boxes all the time and afraid of getting anything wrong. Whereas I think what's more important is that we just sit there and get business moving as much as possible, get people in jobs, because that's what's going to keep going.
It's music to our ears. That's how Western Sydney rolls. Treasurer, it's fantastic. Maybe just to advise, a couple of personal questions for you. This period of massive transformation is not only about treasurers and tax reform, it's about us as people. The other side of the bridge, how are you different as a politician, as a father, as a community leader? We talked about Andrew Constance having his transformation via the bushfires. How do you think you do? What's business is unusual for you as a bloke when we come out of this?
Look, I look at the positives. I mean, in many ways, some would say it's a positive, but I go into less functions, which means I think I've spent more time in the evening at home, and spending more time with the kids, I think, has been a fantastic, really, really good for me personally, and I've really enjoyed that. And new ways of doing things, like communicating through these channels, I think will set up. Once we're through this, the way that we have deal with people and have business, I think, will change. I mean, obviously, face-to-face is most important and always remain part of it. But I think things like this will certainly open up new opportunities. But I think sometimes it's apparent that when you lose some freedoms, that you then appreciate it a lot more. We appreciate things, and you see it. I've spent a lot more time going on walks with my wife. And just talking together, I think, has been lovely and something that I've cherished during this time. And maybe it's because we're told we can't go anywhere that we now embrace these small little moments. And I think there's a lesson that we could take out of this that, as I said earlier, things we take for granted. When
the social isolating ends and your extended period of extensive homeschooling comes in, what are the things you want to do? Is it, I'm a kid who grew up in the Epping pub. I probably hadn't been there since it was legal. But that's an area. I did the PR for the opening of Make Tracks to Tracks. Trust me.
Right.
So this is my baby, the Epping pub. But when it's all over, we get out again. Is it a trip to the footy? Is it a national park? Is it a little restaurant down the road? What are you looking forward to do when the social licensing restrictions have been eased? Yeah,
catching up with mates at the pub. That's just something we've done for our entire lives, and it's now. I certainly miss that. I miss going to the footy. I miss watching the Tigers. It's good that they're coming. We're going to see season back. I see Parramatta there.
It's always the Easter Monday game's always special.
That's right. Yeah, I think we get flogged every year. Anyway, but in fact, I think we're sitting in 9th, which is our usual spot. So the season
we're the rating premiers, so it's okay.
There you go. Anyway,
2 rounds.
We're never in the 8th. But look, I think going to the footy, hanging out at the pub with mates. But at the same time, it's also the things I look forward to doing again. Yeah. But I'm also now, which is great, appreciating things that I might not have appreciated as much as I should have before. Well, and it's great watching a bit more TV, like Netflix. I was watching The Last Dance last night.
Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
You're not a Tiger King. You're not a Tiger King guy.
No. I'm a Reggie Miller guy.
What a great team. Well, Treasurer, you fought a hard campaign for all of us to get the lockout shut down, to now replaced with a lockdown. So I think your drive in government to get us back out is marvellous. And thanks for your time today. From a Western Sydney perspective, we're in this with you for the long haul. We've got a long way to dig out of this. The big dig the government does, the infrastructure project, has never been more Bradfield-esque, never been more required than it's going to be for confidence and economy and jobs events of the while as we build those steel spines. The rail lines and the other pieces of infrastructure. So anything we can do to bring private sector and community with you on the journey, it's the sort of partnership that's going to get us out of this. So,
great. Likewise, and thanks very much, Chris. Appreciate it.
Thank you.